Why are you ignoring me? I've decided not to speak to strangers. I understand. I'll leave. Living with my in-laws, they completely ignore me. I expected it from my mother-in-law, but I never imagined my father-in-law would treat me like this. There was a reason why the in-laws, who were once kind, had changed. It was because of my sister-in-law, who disliked me, returned home. With the arrival of my sister-in-law, our peaceful life together was completely upended. Don't regret it, okay? You think I'm gonna regret this? Think again, jerk. I packed my bags and left my in-laws' house. Sure enough, just 3 days after I left, chaos broke out in their household. I met my husband at my workplace. He was in sales and frequently visited my office, and I was his main contact. As we spent more time in meetings and discussions, I grew fond of him, a caring and kind man. Tall and not necessarily what you'd call handsome, but maybe what you'd describe as having a charismatic vibe. He was popular, but for some reason, he said he liked me, and we began dating. When we talked, he mentioned he had grown up in a typical family with parents and a sister. I lost my parents in an accident when I was young and grew up in an orphanage. It was a complex issue for me, but when we started dating, I quickly shared my background with him. He responded, "That must have been tough, but don't worry, I'll always be there for you." Soon after, he proposed. From the beginning, my husband intended our relationship to head towards marriage and quickly introduced me to his parents. During the introduction, I told them about growing up in the orphanage. They listened attentively and reassured me that it wouldn't matter in our marriage. It made me very happy. Besides, they told me that being raised in an orphanage had nothing to do with being their daughter-in-law, which truly made me happy. Only my sister-in-law, being very attached to her brother, seemed taken aback, asking, "You grew up in an orphanage?" My husband had to reprimand her. In retrospect, she probably disliked me from our first meeting. I didn't give it much thought at that time, thinking we had just met. Before our marriage, my husband and I discussed moving in with his parents. We seriously considered it, but in the end, I decided not to quit my job. Turns out, my husband was set to be transferred soon. I thought about quitting my job to move with him, but my career was going well, and I had just been given direct reports. We discussed it and decided he would move on his own. After getting married, I wanted to savor that newlywed feeling for a bit. I even casually thought about visiting my husband during the long weekends for a little vacation feel. The idea of moving in with the in-laws so soon after marriage was a bit daunting, but my husband probably felt more at ease living with his parents. Plus, to put his ever-worried mother at ease, he probably wanted us to live together. Having lost my parents at a young age, I had always yearned for a family, so living with them wasn't an entirely unappealing idea. Plus, my in-laws had always treated me kindly, and I had grown fond of them. Balancing work and my duties as a daughter-in-law was challenging, but having a family made me happy and fulfilled. One day, my father-in-law approached me with an unexpected request. This would mark the beginning of the unraveling of our seemingly happy cohabitation. It was a time when my overly anxious mother-in-law, who tended to act domineering towards my father-in-law, was out shopping. I was about to start cleaning on my day off when my father-in-law asked to speak with me. "What's the matter?" "Well, I don't want my wife to know, but I'm taking a leave from work." "Wait, a leave?" He explained that he had been having problems with his boss and coworkers, and his health had deteriorated to the point where he had no choice but to take a leave. My mother-in-law is a good person, but she's always anxious and a bit neurotic. Living with them, I came to realize her neurotic tendencies and how my father-in-law tiptoed around her to avoid upsetting her. He had always been on the slimmer side, but now that I think about it, he did seem to have lost some weight recently. It would be nice if the mother-in-law was the type to genuinely worry about my father-in-law's weight loss. However, when he had previously taken a sick day due to a cold, she remarked, "A cold? All of your colleagues are at executive levels by now. It's because you're always taking days off, claiming bad health or colds. That's why you don't get promoted." Rather than showing concern, she was the kind to give him a hard kick in the pants. He probably tried his best to push through, no matter how poor his health was. However, his condition worsened, and he secretly took multiple sick days to visit the hospital. He was both mentally and physically at his limit. With his frequent early departures, tardiness, and absences, there was talk of him possibly taking a temporary leave from work. But my father-in-law didn't want to upset my mother-in-law under any circumstances. If he were to suggest taking a leave of absence, it's obvious that she would explode in anger. Besides, my father-in-law's salary wasn't that great, and he depended on his overtime pay. So, taking a leave would mean he'd be making significantly less. If he told my husband, he'd probably end up telling my mother-in-law. So, he approached me, asking if I could help with the living expenses. If I suggest taking a leave, she might even divorce me. Hearing those words from him felt like a punch to the gut. I deeply appreciated my in-laws, who had warmly welcomed me without discriminating against my background of being raised in an institution. Determined to be supportive, I made up my mind to help him out during this tough time. Understood. I'll transfer money into your account every month. Please use it for living expenses. I'm truly sorry. I'll do my best to recover quickly and return to work. Thank you so much. After that, my father-in-law pretended to go to work as usual while I transferred money into his bank account, which he used for living expenses. My mother-in-law, being rather carefree, didn't meticulously check her bank statements or maintain a household ledger, so she never noticed my transfers. Pretending to go to work, he would visit a mental clinic or take walks in the serene mountains. Gradually, his complexion seemed to improve. I thought he might be returning to work soon, but then, an unexpected event occurred. After a marital spat, my sister-in-law returned to her parental home. There's nothing like being home. I thought I'd go crazy if I had to stay with that idiot husband of mine. I'll be staying here for a while. Please prepare meals for me, too. I was well aware from our first meeting that my sister-in-law didn't like me. During our family's first meeting, my husband was really upset because she was visibly displeased. During the wedding, she maintained a sour expression throughout and even told me point blank, "My brother looks so good, but you. It would have been better if he married someone prettier." And she openly looked down on me, raised in an institution, saying it was embarrassing that I didn't have parents to present at the wedding. However, she got married earlier than us and had already moved out, so I thought our interactions would be limited. That's why I thought living with them would be okay. If she had been living at home, I wouldn't have even considered moving in, knowing the daily jibes I would receive. Still, I thought this visit was just temporary due to her marital problems and expected her to leave within a few days. Despite her stern behavior towards my father-in-law, my mother-in-law was never harsh towards me. And even if my sister-in-law had made snide comments, I believed my mother-in-law would have defended me. But I was wrong. One day when I returned from work, something seemed off about my mother-in-law's behavior. "Is something wrong?" She seemed distant, not engaging in her usual conversation. When I asked, she responded, "Did you know you've been bad-mouthing me behind my back?" "What? I've never said anything bad about you. You've always been kind to me, and I'm truly grateful. Why would I badmouth you? You've been playing the good daughter-in-law card all this time, but you've been bad-mouthing me on the side. Fine, whatever." Saying this, she left the room. In the hallway, my sister-in-law was smirking. "Looks like you've fallen out of favor. Did your true colors show? Being raised in an institution, your background really does show, huh? It's better not to badmouth people, you know." "I haven't said anything bad about her." "Oh, the neighbors seem to have heard it. After I returned home after such a long time, they told me that you've been constantly criticizing her." "What? Who are these neighbors?" "Look, it's been a while since I got married and moved out, so I've kind of forgotten the names of the neighbors. I've never said any of those things. Stop making things up." "Oh my, how rude. Mom. She's calling me a liar and bullying me." Saying this, she entered my mother-in-law's room. After that, my sister-in-law's malicious behavior escalated. She claimed I told her to sleep in the corridor and take the last bath because she's just a lodger. She'd complained to my mother-in-law about every little thing. Every time, I had to explain that I hadn't said or done any such thing. However, my mother-in-law seemed to be completely taken in by my sister-in-law's words and seemed to be under her influence. My sister-in-law continued her stay, making me wonder if she intended to stay indefinitely. With these worries, I headed home with a heavy heart. I'm home. Previously, my mother-in-law would cheerfully greet me with, "Welcome back." Now, there's silence. "I'll get dinner ready." Saying this and stepping into the living room, I was shocked. Normally, my sister-in-law would nag me to prepare dinner quickly, but now, my mother-in-law, father-in-law, and sister-in-law were all eating sushi together. Surprised, my sister-in-law said, "Oh? It looks like someone who isn't family is home. You're not thinking of having sushi, are you?" Without even glancing at me, my mother-in-law continued eating while watching TV. "If you wanted sushi, you should have said so. I rushed home after shopping." "Huh? No one asked for that." "Hey, Mom, Dad, I went out with my friends during the day and got some delicious pudding. Let's eat together." As my sister-in-law said that, without paying any mind to me, the three of them started eating the pudding. I was exhausted from work and didn't have the energy to get upset, so I went to my room without eating. The next day, my sister-in-law said she was going out with friends and asked me to drive her to the station. I obviously declined since it was a weekday and I had work. Even if we were headed in the same direction, it would be a completely different route, and she wanted to leave close to noon. There's no way I could take her. "Just take a day off, it's fine. Your cute little sis-in-law just wants a ride. She never had the chance to relax and hang out after she got married, right? Can't you be a bit kinder to her now? With all due respect, didn't you go out with friends last night after getting a late-night call? Seems like you've been going out almost every day since you came home. I have work. Please take the bus or train." My mother-in-law and sister-in-law were murmuring in the background, but I was fed up. I left for work. However, that night, the defining event that made me decide to leave this house took place. I got held up at work and returned home after picking up some groceries, expecting to be berated. It had started raining by the time I left the office, and it was pouring so hard that even getting in and out of the car, I was drenched. I wondered what nasty trick would be played on me tonight, but when I got home, the three of them were eating takeout, just like the day before. No greeting, acting as if they didn't even notice my return. But I've grown used to this treatment. I glanced toward the courtyard from the hallway and saw something placed in the center of the garden. Taking a closer look, it was my belongings. A designer bag I bought with my first paycheck. Shoes that were my first birthday gift from my husband. And even my computer that I use for work at home was soaked. As I was in shock, my sister-in-law said with a smirk, "I felt so grossed out having a stranger's things in the house, so I threw them out. Flaunting a designer bag like that, how arrogant of you." Neither of my in-laws said a word about her outrageous behavior. "Why didn't you stop her? Have I done something to you? Do you really believe her lies? That I've been bad-mouthing you, bullying her? Aren't you mad at her for what she did?" My mother-in-law avoided my gaze, staying silent. "Why won't you say anything? I can't talk to strangers. I can't be friendly with someone who's not family." My mother-in-law wouldn't even look at me. My sister-in-law grinned, waiting for my rebuttal. "Wait. Where's my father-in-law? I'm the one supporting him during his time off. I'm the one helping out with the finances in this house. Sure, I did it out of gratitude, but shouldn't he defend me now? Surely, he'd be on my side? Hoping for support." I looked at him. But he walked past me, without a word, and went into his room. That was the breaking point for me. "I see. I've had enough." "Oh? Are you mad?" "I'm sorry. To be honest, I never liked you from the beginning, you know. Being raised in an institution and all. Just don't regret this. Like I would, loser." I packed my things and prepared to leave immediately. Seeing me in this state, only my father-in-law seemed flustered since he was the one depending on me financially. Still, he didn't try to stop me or defend me. I was completely done with his apathy. My husband's work assignment was quite far away, but I wanted to leave this house as soon as possible. I quickly got in my car and drove to him. I never once confided in my husband about all this. I doubt my mother-in-law told him about my sister-in-law coming back home. If he had known, he would have contacted me, knowing I don't get along with her. But my husband never mentioned anything about my sister-in-law in his calls or messages. I never felt anything off about my husband's behavior, but perhaps he's being manipulated by her, fed lies about various things. Even now, as I head to him, he might treat me with the same cold attitude as them. My heart was exhausted, feeling so suspicious even towards my husband, whom I trust most. If he's of the same mind and attitude as them, maybe divorce is the only option. That's how deeply distressed I felt. When I arrived at his out-of-state apartment, he hadn't returned yet, perhaps busy since it was the end of the month. As I waited, my husband energetically entered the apartment, maybe having noticed the lights. "What? If you were coming, you should have told me. I would have come home earlier." "What? A surprise?" "No, just seeing your face." He immediately greeted me with a radiant smile. The relief of seeing him happy to see me combined with the humiliation from my in-laws' house made a mixture of emotions flood out, and I broke down crying. "What? What happened? Did I say something wrong? Seriously, what's going on?" It seemed my husband had no idea about the treatment I received at his parents' house. I composed myself, knowing I had to clearly explain everything to him, and began to recount everything. How I've been financially assisting his father, who took medical leave without telling his wife. That his sister had returned and was now staying at their parents' home. That she's been feeding his mother lies about me, turning her cold towards me. How they referred to me as an outsider. How they ignored me, left my belongings out in the rain and ruined them. Through tears and pauses, I told him everything. Finally, I made it clear that I had no intention of ever returning to that house, and that if he couldn't agree with me on this, I'd want a divorce. My husband apologized for being too engrossed in his work and not checking in on me more often, regretting his family's behavior towards me. Of course, he told me I don't have to go back to his parents' house, or even speak to them. Even if I ever forgave them, he was adamant about cutting ties with his parents and sister. He also promised not to provide any financial aid to his father anymore. That night, I felt truly relieved. The tension I had been holding melted away, and I had a peaceful sleep by his side. After that, I never returned to my in-laws' house. While commuting from my husband's out-of-state place was not feasible, I had already approached my company about working remotely since my sister-in-law and mother-in-law started treating me harshly. My job doesn't necessarily require being in the office, and many of my colleagues and superiors also work remotely. While I have to visit the office a few times a month, several colleagues live even further away, so switching to remote work wasn't a problem. I hadn't truly experienced married life since moving in with his family and dealing with my sister-in-law's bullying, but now, we could finally live like newlyweds. Just as I was setting up my remote workstation, predictably, my sister-in-law contacted me. It turned out the day after I left their house was the day my father-in-law was supposed to get paid. My mother-in-law usually withdraws a certain amount and transfers it to their household account on payday, but this time, she couldn't. Of course not. Until now, I had been supplementing my father-in-law's reduced salary due to his time off. Upon checking their balance, my mother-in-law confronted him, and he confessed that I had been helping them financially. "Hey, why didn't you tell me you were covering the living expenses?" "He told me not to, saying he didn't want you to know. So I kept it a secret. Anyway, we're running out of money for living expenses, and there's no one to cook or do laundry. The room is a mess. As his wife, you need to come back and take care of these things. And transfer money quickly." How heartless. I told you, didn't I? Don't regret this. I have no intention of going back to that house or continuing as your maid. Why should I help people who hate me, destroy my belongings, and treat me like this? Aren't you his wife? Without your help, we can't pay the electricity or gas bills. We can't even go shopping. That's why I said it. I'm an outsider, so it's none of my business, right? I hung up, ignoring my sister-in-law's ranting. She and my mother-in-law kept pestering me with calls and messages, but I ignored all of them. Even after my husband returned from work, the persistent calls from them continued. When my husband answered, he told them firmly, "I'll never forgive you for how you treated her, and I'm never sending her back to you. I'm not coming back either. I don't consider you my family anymore. Stay away from my wife, or you'll regret it." Given that my sister-in-law adored her brother and my mother-in-law heavily relied on him, they were probably in shock. A few days later, I received a call from my father-in-law. He said living with my mother-in-law and sister-in-law was becoming unbearable, and he begged me to continue the financial assistance. I'm still grateful for them accepting me, who grew up in an orphanage, when they married. But they didn't support me in my time of need despite all the financial help I've provided. I don't owe them anything. Why should I help those who joined others in ignoring me? I'll never assist you again. And with that, I ended the call. Later on, my relentless mother-in-law and sister-in-law audaciously showed up at my workplace. Since I was already working remotely and had a bad feeling about them, I'd informed my company about the situation. The security was alerted immediately. Apparently, they caused a scene, demanding that the company force me to send money back home. Upon hearing this, my husband said, "Report them to the police." Colleagues at my company were supportive, saying, "I can't believe you lived with those people. Focus on your remote work with your husband." As for my in-laws, my father-in-law's health deteriorated under the pressure from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, and he eventually resigned. My sister-in-law tried to return to her husband's family, but he refused to take her back. The small town quickly caught wind of her drama at my workplace. Given the embarrassment, there was an uproar at her in-laws' place. The original reason for the fight between my sister-in-law and her husband was her affair. This incident added to their issues, leading to an immediate decision to divorce. Without a home, my in-laws and sister-in-law moved to a cheap apartment, managing to get by on part-time jobs. As for my husband and me, we're finally living peaceful days, feeling mentally and physically fulfilled. Recently, we found out we're expecting a child and are overjoyed. We're looking forward to the day we meet our baby, cherishing our time together. We're gonna build a house for 2 families. Wait, what? Where's the money for that? Huh? Obviously, it's gonna come from your savings. I was taken aback when my husband suddenly informed me that we'd be living with his parents. Now I understood why he'd been so dismissive. Trying to hide my shock, he continued, "If you really hate the idea, we can just get divorced." Fine. I'll divorce you. I couldn't stand him having his way any longer. Besides, there's no way I'd divorce him for free. He's gonna pay for this. And just as he wanted, we're gonna get divorced. What the heck did you do? Who knows? Maybe it's just your past catching up to you. My husband would soon regret his actions, crying over them. And he'd end up losing everything. My name's Catherine, and I'm currently a homemaker. I met my husband, Bob, through my previous job. More accurately, he was introduced to me by my boss at the time. This boss happened to be a college senior of mine, and we've been close since our university days. Got some time today? Yes, I do, but what? Actually, I've got someone I want to introduce you to. Someone you want to introduce? Even if he was my boss, I found it a bit bothersome. I wanted to go home early and watch a recorded show. But I couldn't simply turn down an invitation from my boss. Well, he's a good guy, don't worry. Just for a bit, okay? Though my first impression of Bob wasn't the best, as we talked, we found we had similar interests. Plus, it was nice not having to be on guard around him. Things progressed quite quickly after that. Will you marry me? You're proposing already? Huh? Sorry. I was just taken aback. So, what's your answer? Bob proposed to me only 3 months into our relationship. Though I was so surprised I made a snarky comment, of course, my answer was a yes. But once we're married, I'd like you to be a homemaker, okay? Sure. That sounds good. I accepted Bob's proposal. I always had the idea of being a homemaker, and I wanted to fulfill Bob's wishes as much as I could. Being a homemaker turned out to be quite a challenge for me every day. You seem tired. Being a homemaker turned out to be quite a challenge for me every day. What do you mean? I thought I'd have more free time. Bob just laughed. You'll get used to it eventually. I'll help out till then. Thank you. That really helps. Honestly, I was grateful for his suggestion. Cleaning, laundry, and other chores weren't my forte, so it always took me a while. Bob never complained about my lack of skill. There were moments when I felt truly grateful to have married him. But it wasn't always smooth sailing. It didn't work out again. You tried so hard, too. But there'll be a next time. Suddenly, Bob's face changed and he raised his voice. What do you know, Catherine? I thought he brought it up, but I held my tongue. Bob works in sales, but apparently, he hasn't been doing well. At that time, I never imagined things would turn out this way. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it that way. My bad. I shouldn't have reacted like that. Even though he apologized, I could see the frustration on his face. In situations like this, I try to think of the right words to say, but I just can't find them. I worried that if I said something else now, it might further upset my husband. Then one day. How was work? Well, I wasn't feeling well, so I took the day off. Oh, okay. Although he said he was feeling sick, he didn't seem to be. He ate his breakfast as usual, and even had seconds when it came to the bread. I had my doubts but didn't think much of it at the time. From that day on, whenever I said something to Bob, he took it as a complaint and got upset. How are you feeling now? Yeah. I'm feeling better. I'm gonna take a short walk. Huh? You haven't rested yet. It's okay. I won't go far. But. Bob's expression changed. I sensed trouble, but it was too late. What now? Got something else to complain about? It's not like that. Then just leave it, okay? Instead of fussing over me, focus on the house. Okay. I felt even more deflated. People say marriage can change a person, but with Bob, it was like he became someone else entirely. Life went on like this, and years passed. Lately, all I thought about was how not to upset Bob. I'll be home late tonight. Got it. What about dinner? I plan on eating when I get home. That day, I waited and waited for my husband to come home. The clock struck 11 p.m., and he was still not back. I'm home. It was just about to turn midnight. Relieved he was finally back, I greeted him with a smile. Welcome back. There's dinner if you want. Nah, I already ate out. Huh? What? Well, you said you'd eat at home today. Oh, did I? Must have slipped my mind. I stood frozen at the entrance. I had prepared dinner and waited without eating, just for him. Without a single apology from Bob, my distrust grew. Am I really loved? Then, one day after such days passed. Here you go. Bob came home holding a bouquet of flowers. They were red roses, my favorite. What's the occasion? What are you talking about? It's Catherine's birthday, isn't it? Oh. With everything going on lately, I had completely forgotten about my own birthday. I got wine and cake too. Let's celebrate. Yes. I didn't expect a surprise, but I was genuinely delighted. That's when I truly felt loved by Bob. We enjoyed a peaceful atmosphere that day, something we hadn't felt in a long time. I wished those moments would last forever, but they didn't. About next month's payments. Huh? Next month? Our happy times ended abruptly. I received money for monthly expenses, but it had noticeably decreased from the beginning. Until now, I had managed by cutting corners, but this time was different. I had my own savings, but I wanted to keep them for retirement. The money you've been giving me isn't enough. What? It should be more than sufficient. Have you been wasting it on something, Catherine? I haven't. I've been saving where I can. You sure you're not just buying things you want? Normally, I might have backed down at this point, but not this time. I wanted children, and considering our future, I believed we needed a serious discussion. I haven't been spending recklessly. It's been tough for months, especially since the amount you give has decreased. You're blaming me? Then where's the rest of the money going? Determined to stand my ground, I said my piece. But Bob, perhaps annoyed by my words, threw his smartphone at me. I instinctively shielded my face. It didn't hit me, but the phone's screen shattered. If you're gonna complain so much, why don't you figure it out? That's why I'm talking to you about it. Another factor exacerbating the issue was Bob's low salary. In his sales job at the company, a significant portion of his pay was incentive-based. The more contracts he secured, the more he earned. But if he couldn't secure contracts, his salary wouldn't increase. Given what he said, I decided to make a suggestion. Fine. I'll get a part-time job and bring in some money. That should solve it, right? But Bob didn't approve. What are you talking about? Didn't you promise to be a homemaker when we got married? But it's getting tough to get by, you know? Even so, it's not okay. You're just gonna neglect household chores, right? I'm not talking about working full-time, though. Feeling that if we didn't resolve this now, it would continue forever, I pressed on. I believed our discussion would ultimately benefit both of us. However, what Bob said next was beyond belief. You wanting to work so much is suspicious. What? How do you figure that? I'm just thinking about our finances. Seeing the conversation take a strange turn, I tried to steer it back, but Bob wasn't listening. Catherine, do you have another man or something? I felt like the trust we'd built over the years was crumbling. After always trying to keep the peace and accommodate Bob's moods, this was the last straw. Fine. I won't work. You're happy now, right? You should have said so sooner. By this time, my love for Bob had almost faded. He'd throw tantrums when things didn't go his way. Such a dominant attitude was too much. And then, after a certain incident, I decided to seek revenge. Just make sure to handle the payments somehow. I can't do much if I'm not working. I get it. But Catherine, you should be more grateful to me. There was a reason Bob was so insistent on me staying home. He wanted to feel like he was providing for the family. However, his ability to be the breadwinner was questionable at best, and he didn't even seem to understand that. Of course, I am grateful. No, you look down on me, don't you? Why would you think that? We can live because of your earnings. See? You do get it. Just be more careful from now on. What I said to Bob wasn't a lie, but dealing with his petty pride was exhausting for me. Honestly, such things seemed so trivial. I started to think that maybe Bob's work troubles were because of his attitude. And then, another problem surfaced. I heard from Bob that you've been getting a bit too confident lately. Excuse me? I was invited over by my in-laws, and the moment I stepped inside, I was confronted with this. If Bob hadn't said anything, it wouldn't have come to this. Moreover, they've always doted on their only son, Bob. So, whatever Bob did, they approved. Who do you think is earning for you? You should be more grateful. Seriously. I responded half-heartedly, finding the situation bothersome. That only added fuel to the fire with my in-laws. What kind of response is that? Are you looking down on us? Honey, say something. Well, a wife should always listen to her husband, right? Why don't you teach her, dear? That's a good idea. This was getting beyond tedious. Being involved with these two could throw one's life into chaos. I had thought they were kind people before the marriage, but I guess they just needed a trigger. Thanks to Bob tattling on me, it triggered them. I apologize, but I have plans after this, so I'll be heading out. I wanted to get out of there as fast as I could. Oh, come on. You've got plenty of time, right? You're just a homemaker after all. My in-laws gave me a nasty smile. No, I really don't have time today, so excuse me. With that, I made a hasty exit from their house. All the way home, my heart was racing. I had never felt this kind of emotion, almost like fear, before. But it wasn't over. Welcome back. Upon returning home, Bob was waiting at the door. Why are you waiting out here? You went to my parents' house, didn't you? Yeah, but I just got a call from my mom. She said you left in a hurry. I realized I had messed up. I had completely forgotten that Bob might contact my in-laws. It's not like I ran away. Then what's it about? I just had a place to go, that's all. I felt my excuse was a bit weak, but it seemed Bob didn't press the matter further. I sighed in relief, looking up at the ceiling. After that, Bob's domineering attitude lessened, and I enjoyed a momentary peace. I feel like I have a fever, so I'm gonna take the day off again. How high is it? Maybe 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit? Alright, I'll get you some medicine. Thanks. He had been regularly going to work recently, but I was concerned that he was taking time off again. I finished my chores for the day and went to check on Bob, who was supposedly resting. When I reached out to empty the trash, I noticed something. There were discarded pills. He was pretending to take them and then throwing them away. I instinctively felt Bob was faking his illness. And then I remembered something. In times like this, he often said he was going for a walk and would leave the house. That's when I decided to set a trap for Bob. I'm going to run some errands and might be back a bit late. Okay. His reply didn't sound like someone who's sick. There was a noticeable energy in his voice. I pretended to leave, but waited in a spot where I could see the front door. Sure enough, about 15 minutes later, I saw Bob leaving the house. Where's he off to? I discreetly followed him and saw him enter a casino nearby. I quickly took out my phone and snapped a photo. It became clear to me that his frequent outings were all because of this. It's no wonder that the money he hands over every month for our expenses has been decreasing. And then, on a certain Saturday, Bob made a shocking statement. This became the catalyst for the upcoming incident. We're gonna build a house for 2 families. Wait, what? Where's the money for that? Huh? Obviously, it's gonna come from your savings. I was left speechless, being suddenly told about moving in with my in-laws. The reason he'd been increasingly disrespectful to me lately became clear. Bob continued, sensing my shock. I'm the head of this household. So, whatever I decide, you gotta follow. Is that so? What on earth is he talking about? The fact that he'd say such things as if they were totally normal, he's not impressive or anything of the sort. If you're not on board with it, we can just get a divorce. Fine. Let's divorce. I couldn't stand being manipulated by Bob any longer. And I wouldn't let him off the hook with just a divorce. Bob needs to be punished. Oh, and by the way, my parents are coming over soon. What? Right now? They'll be staying here until the house is built. Make sure you treat them well. With that, Bob hastily began preparing to leave. I couldn't believe how selfish he was being to leave at a time like this, but I saw it as a golden opportunity. I wanted to leave right away, but I thought it'd be satisfying to tell my in-laws about the divorce in person. I'll handle it. I saw off my husband leaving home and couldn't help but laugh. As I eagerly awaited the arrival of my in-laws, they were like, "Oh? Where's Bob? He left a bit ago. He told me to look after you too. Could you help me with the bags?" Sure. In the end, I found myself hauling each and every bag into the room, just as directed. While carrying the bags, a question pops into my mind. Why did we decide to live in this house before building a multi-generational home? My in-laws' house is much bigger, and they've been living there for years, so there really wasn't any need for us to move in together. How much time are you gonna take? Honestly, thinking about our future living together, this isn't a great start. Once I finished tidying up and thought of taking a short break, my in-laws didn't allow me even that. Fetch this, buy that, they treated me like some sort of housemaid. I decided it was about time and broke the news to my in-laws. Bob asked me for a divorce earlier, so I'm getting divorced. What? Catherine, what are you saying out of the blue? That's right. You are here to work for us. I've already made up my mind. I quickly packed my things and prepared to leave. My in-laws' faces were obviously shocked. If you do that, you don't know what will happen. Oh, Bob won't keep quiet either. I was the one told by Bob himself that if I didn't like it, we should get divorced. There's nothing wrong with it. How dare you, being just the wife? The resentment from my in-laws was palpable, but I wasn't scared or anything. By the way, thinking Bob can support both of you, I don't think it's feasible. What do you mean by that? Why don't you ask him directly? They seemed to be screaming about something afterward, but I ignored them and left. I thought of returning home, but given the distance, I decided to check into a nearby hotel. Then, I made a call. Sorry to disturb your day off. I have something to discuss. Hey, long time no see. What's up? It's about Bob. I told the boss everything about his actions up to now. I see. So that's what it was about. Did you notice anything unusual? Well, I've had my suspicions about him for a while now. According to the boss, Bob had been on the company's radar. Well, with the way he's been behaving, it's no surprise. Also, I have photos of Bob lying and going to the casino. I'll send them to you later. That would help. But are you sure about this? Yes. I'm planning on divorcing Bob. I can't take it any longer. I see. With all he's done, he probably won't last long at this company anyway. I left everything in the hands of the boss and enjoyed some time to myself. During this time, my phone wouldn't stop ringing with calls from Bob, so I turned it off. It was Saturday, he was gonna be in for a surprise when he'd work on Monday. I wish I could see Bob's face. Then Monday came. What did you do? I turned on my phone to find over 100 missed calls from Bob. Excitedly, I answered. So he sounded pretty panicked. Who knows? It's just comeuppance for everything you've done so far. I responded that way to Bob. Then, Bob became furious. Well, I saw this coming. I got told I'm fired when I went to the company. It must be something you did. I let out a deep sigh. Even if I hadn't intervened, he probably would have been fired at some point. I just expedited the process. So, the company knew about everything you've been up to, didn't they? That's not possible. I made sure it was hidden well. Bob seemed really flustered. Well, whatever happens to you is none of my business. Huh? You think I'm gonna be the one in trouble if you get fired? Bob seems to have forgotten what he said. My in-laws must have told him. Why would I be bothered? We're getting a divorce, after all. Bob went silent, seemingly stunned. Did he actually think I wouldn't go through with the divorce? If so, he's truly a clueless man. I'm utterly dumbfounded. You're serious about that? Of course. Who'd want to be with someone who jokes about such a thing? It was just a slip of the tongue. And why would anyone want to live with your parents who are drowning in debt? What are you talking about? Apparently, my in-laws hadn't told him. I used my weekend to gather information about my in-laws. I just had to know the real reason they wanted to live with us. Fortunately, my in-laws' house was just a 15-minute train ride away, so I decided to pay them a visit. The reason my in-laws agreed to move in with us in the first place was that they no longer had a home to live in. I did my homework, Bob. Even talked to the neighbors. Who'd have thought that gambling would lead them to lose their house? They're both losers. It's crazy, but both of my in-laws had gambling addictions. They poured money into things like casino and racked up debts, even using their house as collateral. They had to sell it in the end. Them coming to our place was just a temporary solution until their new house was built. You. What about you? Faking illness to go gambling? You knew about that? Well, even if you hid it, it doesn't matter now. I've got pictures, just so you know. You're meddling too much. Where are you now? You think I'm gonna tell you? Bob seemed too emotional, almost irrational. I thought this would be a good time to speak my mind. Spit it out already! Instead of that, why not tell your parents the truth? What truth are you talking about? About your salary. What if they knew you're only making $3,500? Basically admitting you're incompetent. I must admit, I'm proud of myself for holding up this long. And to top it off, Bob was using that money he earned on gambling. You both have secrets, don't you? Maybe it's best to get it all out now. Shut up! I was gonna tell them eventually. You don't have to lie, you know. I chuckled, mocking Bob. Looks like the tables have turned. He's probably getting what he deserves for always looking down on me. After all you've done, you think it won't come back to bite you? Remember, you're just a homemaker. The one who's gonna suffer is you. I don't know about that. To me, it just sounds like the whining of a sore loser. How did it come to this? Who knows? I'm tired. Later. With that, I hung up. And then headed out to meet a lawyer who assists divorce. Divorcing him was only part of my revenge. Bob and his kind are gonna suffer even more from here on out. Later, I got a divorce. As expected, I received a call from Bob. I have debts to pay. What am I supposed to do? Seems like after losing his job, he made the dumb decision to live off of loans. His parents are struggling with debt, and he can't even see that? What a pitiful man. That sounds tough. But you gotta pull yourself up by your bootstraps. I'm cheering for you. Don't you feel even a bit of responsibility to help your ex-husband? Why would I? We're strangers now. You. If I'd stayed humble, you'd take advantage, wouldn't you? Trying to intimidate me now doesn't make any sense, you know? I said, laughing, before hanging up. Afterwards, it seems Bob decided to cut ties with his parents. Moreover, his parents weren't aware of Bob's salary situation. Apparently, they had a falling out over it and decided to part ways. Well, either way, a bright future for them doesn't seem likely. On my end. You've had it tough recently, huh? No, thank you for all your help during that time. Well, I wanted to ask, would you consider coming back to work with us? We're short-staffed right now. I'd be really grateful, are you sure? Of course. It'd help us out too. And so, I found a job, and my new life is going smoothly. My savings, which my ex-husband was after, are safe. From now on, I want to spend both my money and time for myself. Enough already! For a moment, I was about to retort. But I held back those words. How long are you gonna be away from home? The housework is piling up. Get back home already. Maybe because I stayed silent, Bob went on ranting. If you don't come back, I'm divorcing you. I don't need a wife who can't even handle house chores. All I could do in response to Bob's harsh words was to sigh. He doesn't seem to get why I'm silent. It's too late for him to be trying to talk to me now. He should realize it's all because he ignored me. Well, if he had understood that, we wouldn't be in this situation in the first place. Fine. If he doesn't get it, I'll make him understand. I never intended to forgive him anyway, so this is perfect. I'll teach him a proper lesson. I stared at Bob, snorted with a smirk, and then closed the front door. My name is Catherine Miller. About a year ago, I married my husband, Bob. When we got married, I was 30, so I had been with my maiden name, Thompson, for 30 years. That's why, at first, it felt a bit strange being called Mrs. Miller. But now, being addressed as Mrs. Miller feels more frustrating than strange. There's a reason I feel this way. You see, things haven't been going well with Bob. Hey, what do you want to eat tonight? I tried asking Bob at breakfast. But there was no response. He just glanced at me briefly and then went back to his smartphone. Sigh, he's not talking to me today either. Lately, Bob's been like this all the time. Even when I try to start a conversation, he doesn't respond or answer my important questions. It's because of this ongoing situation that every time I'm called Mrs. Miller, I'm sharply reminded of our marriage and it frustrates me. I can't take this lifestyle much longer. I've been thinking that more and more. Of course, Bob wasn't always this reserved. He used to be kind and cheerful. I first met Bob during his company's corporate trip. I was working for a travel agency at the time, serving as the tour guide for his company outing. That's when we crossed paths. Bob was having a great time with his colleagues. Moreover, he was considerate towards me, their tour guide. "Would you like to join us?" "I'm sorry, I'm on duty right now." Being a guide for a middle or high school field trip often means paying close attention to many details. But in this case, the group was all adults. Nobody was being problematic or hard to manage. Still, it wouldn't have been professional for me to just ditch my responsibilities and have fun with the group. In the end, I declined Bob's invitation and focused on my job. I wondered later if I had made a mistake. However, at the end of the tour, Bob told me this. "How about we go out sometime? I'd love to see more of your smile." It took me by surprise. Being a guide, you do get approached often. But nobody had ever been this earnest with me before. "All right, let's just exchange contact information for now." I was so thrilled, that was the best response I could muster. We exchanged numbers with my heart racing like a schoolgirl. After that, we started communicating more and eventually started dating. And that led to our marriage a year ago. Looking back now, I feel our days before marriage might have been better. Once we got married, I began to see sides of him I didn't like. "You left your clothes out again." "Huh? What are you talking about?" Bob replied, playing dumb. I picked up the suit he'd left on the sofa. "This, Bob. Don't leave it on the sofa. Put it in the closet." "Oh, that. My bad," he responded with a chuckle. It just infuriated me even more. He's just like a child. Leaves his clothes everywhere, drops his stuff around the house, and no matter how many times I point it out, Bob just apologizes on the spot. And does the same thing the next day. And it felt like it was getting worse day by day. After our marriage, these irritating habits of Bob became more and more noticeable. Apparently, Bob felt the same about some of my habits. One late night when I returned home after work, he yelled at me. "Catherine, there's a pile of laundry. Aren't you washing anything?" "Yeah, sorry. I'll get to it right away. It's our peak season, and I've been swamped at work." It was during the spring break, and our travel agency was in the middle of its busiest period. There were many trip bookings, and the workload had increased. It's the most lucrative time for a travel agency. So yes, I had been neglecting the housework. I felt bad about it. But I explained to Bob that this was only temporary and things would settle down soon. "Just making excuses to be lazy." "It's not an excuse. Your company has busy seasons too, right?" "So what? If it interferes with the housework, maybe you should just quit your job. You're my wife, after all," Bob said condescendingly. At that moment, I was infuriated. I couldn't help but raise my voice in response. "What's that supposed to mean? I work too. Shouldn't you be helping with the housework?" "Why should I do housework? Isn't that the wife's job?" "We're both working, so we should both pitch in, right? Don't you get it?" I confronted Bob, but he just turned away. Then, in a sulking tone, he said, "House chores have always been the wife's job, haven't they? You knew that before we got married." "Things have changed. Couples work together now." Even though I said this, Bob acted as if he hadn't heard. Eventually, our argument escalated and we slowly stopped talking. A few days later, when I came home, I heard Bob's voice from inside the house. "Huh? Is someone over? I cautiously entered the living room and met eyes with my mother-in-law in the kitchen. Oh, welcome back. Hi, why are you here? Well, she sighed before continuing. The story dated back a few hours. As she was preparing dinner, Bob had suddenly called her. Mom, I need your help. Catherine won't do any housework. What? Catherine? She keeps saying it's her busy season, so she's slacking off. I can't even get a decent meal. He apparently said. Of course, that was a big lie. Sure, because it's a busy season, I might not be on top of all the chores. I might do laundry for 2 days in one go. But I do prepare meals and handle the basic chores. So, I defended myself confidently. I sometimes use meal kits, but I still cook the meals myself. Bob interrupted. What's a meal kit? Sounds like a shortcut to me. I might have prepped ingredients, but I still cook everything from scratch. It's still cutting corners. Bob raised his voice, and his mother stepped in between us. After calming Bob down, she turned to me and said, Anyway, it seems you have been struggling, so I came to help with the chores. I see, I'm sorry. Don't worry about it. I bet Bob's just exaggerating. She glanced at Bob, who looked away, clearly unhappy. She then smiled warmly at me. Bob's been complaining, so I'll help with chores during your busy season. But it's okay. Just let me know what you'd like help with. With that said, Bob started devouring the food on the table. Soon after finishing, he promptly retreated to his room. Watching his retreating figure, the mother-in-law turned to me and said, I'm sorry, Catherine. What? Why? About Bob. He's probably not doing much around the house, is he? All I could do was give a wry smile when my mother-in-law said that. Seeming to understand my feelings, she continued. Bob probably called me over just to spite you. To spite me? As I asked for clarification, she sighed before answering. From her perspective, Bob was frustrated with me for cutting corners with the chores while ignoring his own flaws. To get back at me, he probably called her over, thinking that if she came, I'd have no choice but to do the housework properly. No matter how busy I was, I wouldn't be able to slack off. Moreover, she would surely scold me for not doing enough. That's what she guessed Bob was thinking. But contrary to his expectations, my mother-in-law showed understanding towards me. Not only that, she actually blamed Bob. This didn't sit well with Bob at all. That's why Bob's been sulking, she said. But what should I? Just leave him be. He's not a child. She laughed off the matter. But things wouldn't be so easy. Because from that day onwards, Bob stopped talking to me altogether. He wouldn't reply, no matter what I said. He'd even turn away from me. At first, I thought he'd give up soon. But no matter how much time passed, Bob didn't seem to want to speak. And like that, days turned into more days. Eventually a week passed, and before I knew it, half a year had gone by. By that time, I had truly reached my limit. This isn't a marriage anymore, is it? Feeling this way, I decided to file for divorce. After work, I went to a lawyer's office. Then, on a particular weekend morning, I left the divorce attorney's business card on the table and went back to my parents' house. To say I held no grudge against Bob would be a lie. But I didn't want revenge or anything like that. If I got some alimony, that would be fine. That's what I thought. But shortly after, an event occurred that completely flipped my emotions upside down. It happened a week after I left the house. In the middle of the day on a weekend, someone unexpectedly came visiting. I'll get it. Holding back my father who was next to me, I stood up and headed towards the front door. May I help you? I called out to the silhouette standing in front of the entrance. But there was no reply. Wondering who it could be, I opened the door slightly. The moment I peeked outside, I was taken aback. Bob? It was Bob standing there. He was looking intently at me, his mouth a tight line. I immediately shut my mouth. Suddenly, Bob raised his voice. What are you doing here? I was stunned by his outburst. Why is Bob angry? After all the silent treatment, I'm the one who should be mad. Such feelings overflowed within me. And at the same time, anger swelled up. Oh, doesn't Bob realize I'm mad? Well, if he doesn't, I'll make him understand. I decided to express my anger silently. Enough already! For a moment, I almost retorted. But I held back those words. How long are you gonna stay away? The house is a mess, just come back already. Since I kept quiet, Bob continued his tirade. If you won't come back, let's just get divorced. I don't need a wife who can't even do household chores. All I could do was sigh at Bob's harsh words. He doesn't even realize why I'm silent. It's too late to talk to me now. Realize that all of this is because you ignored me. Well, if he had realized it, we wouldn't be in this situation in the first place. It's fine, I'll make him understand. I never intended to forgive him anyway. I'll make sure he pays for his mistakes. After glaring at Bob, I snorted in derision and shut the door. Hey, Catherine! Don't ignore me! Bob tried to forcefully open the door. I held the door firmly, staying silent. Stop kidding around! Come back now! It was when Bob said that. Noticing the commotion, my father rushed out from the living room. What's going on, Catherine? Dad, please help. I whispered, asking for his help. My father took my place and confronted Bob outside. What do you want? Bob flinched at my father's stern tone. Soon, Bob started to look evasive and began making excuses. Catherine hasn't come home, and she left all the chores behind, so. I've heard all about it. This is your fault, isn't it? No, I didn't really. Bob looked more flustered. My father, pushing him into a corner, told him. You haven't been talking to Catherine, have you? And you came to pick her up? How can you even say that? Well, by not talking to her, you essentially gave up on your relationship. It's too late for regrets now. Bob jumped at my father's booming voice. Bob quickly distanced himself from my father and pointed at me. I'll forgive you now. At your age, you won't have many chances left after a divorce. All bark and no bite. That's the phrase that came to mind. He looked that pathetic. I sighed and retreated further inside the house. You'll regret this, Bob shouted. It was so loud I could hear him clearly inside. Shortly after, my father returned. I asked him about Bob. Where's Bob? He ran off. So, what are you gonna do? I initially planned to leave him be, but I've changed my mind. I'll teach him a lesson and make him truly regret it. I was determined. I was about to contact a lawyer. When my phone rang. Huh? A call from Bob? I guess he switched to calling since I ignored him. However, my intention to not talk to him remained. I ignored the call. It ended shortly after. He seems to have given up. Just as I murmured that, the phone rang again. And after that, the calls just wouldn't stop coming in. So persistent. I might as well block him. I blocked Bob's number. I knew he'd figure it out soon, but I didn't care. If he gets the message that I want to ignore him forever, that's enough. That's what I thought. After that, I don't know if Bob realized he was blocked. But he didn't come to the house. And for that, I was relieved. And the next day, I went to work as usual. On the way home, I figured I'd stop by the lawyer's office. I'll discuss the next steps with them. That's what I was thinking while working. Lunch break rolled around, and I stepped out of the office to grab a bite. As I was heading out, a voice called out to me. Catherine! I've been waiting for you! Turning toward the voice, it was Bob. I was taken aback and blurted out. Why are you here, Bob? Catherine, why haven't you come back? You don't answer calls, what the hell are you thinking? Bob ranted loudly, drawing attention. I got flustered. Hey, don't make a scene here. You ignore me in person and over the phone. What choice do I have? He raised his voice, clearly agitated. By now, I was getting really annoyed. All he ever thinks about is himself. Even though this whole mess started because he decided to give me the cold shoulder, I wonder how I could get through to him. Just as I was pondering this, a colleague named Paul emerged from the office. Paul is a male coworker. He's been hitting the gym, and it shows. Noticing the commotion between Bob and me, he stepped in. Is everything okay? Paul asked, concerned. I managed a rueful smile, replying. It's a little complicated. But from the look of it, Paul seemed to get the gist. He stared at Bob and said, Do you have business with one of our employees? Mind your own business. This is between a husband and wife. Husband and wife, huh? Paul gave me a quick glance. I shook my head. Suddenly, Bob yelled, Catherine! Stop lying! We're married, aren't we? No, we're not. We're complete strangers. I snapped back. His face turned beet red with anger. That's a lie! We got married a year ago, and we've been living together ever since. Bob began his rant, looking all high and mighty. I was looking at him with disbelief. Waiting for him to finish, I finally interrupted. Done with your tall tale? What? It's not made up. Well, where's the punchline about us being divorced? Bob looked stunned at my remark. Seeing his expression, I teasingly said, Oh, did you forget that you signed the divorce papers from my attorney? What are you talking about? I didn't sign anything. You did. It was on the papers my lawyer sent. I said in a slightly lower voice. What are you saying? Bob asked in disbelief, so I began to recount the events after leaving our home. The day after I left our home, divorce papers were sent to Bob. Bob might sign it, or he might not. Either way, I thought it was fine. But a few days later, there was a twist. My mother-in-law visited me. Apparently, Bob had asked her to handle the household chores in my absence. She urgently asked about the legal papers. When I told her how Bob had been ignoring me, she became furious. Then, she pulled out the divorce papers. He did something terrible, but he did sign these, she said, urging me to submit them right away. And so, with my lawyer's assistance, the divorce was finalized. And just like that, we were officially divorced. Hearing all this, Bob looked bitter. I never wanted a divorce. Then why did you sign the papers? I was drunk when I did. Bob started making excuses. I was drunk and just signed it for fun. I never really intended to divorce. It was just a game. He went on with his excuses. But once you signed the divorce papers, there's no way those excuses will fly. You really expect anyone to believe that? But Shut it. We're already divorced. If you say one more thing, I'll call the police. I snapped at him. Bob looked down, biting his lip like a child. Just go away. I told him off. Bob turned his back, murmuring, You'll regret this. That's my line. Bob then scurried away. Surely, he's learned his lesson by now. We're officially divorced, and he's the one who signed the papers. He can't object now. I couldn't help but laugh. Later, I thanked Paul by inviting him for lunch. We had an unexpectedly great conversation. After work, I headed to the attorney's office. But then a problem surfaced. Bob might not agree to discuss it. We'll do everything we can, the female lawyer reassured me. But if Bob tries to approach me again, it'll be a nightmare. I emphasized this to the attorney. My job was done. All I had to do now was trust the attorney. I headed home, relieved. But days went by without any contact from the lawyer's office. Instead, something else arrived at my place. It was about 10 days after visiting the attorney, when my distraught father approached me. Something strange was sent to you. He handed me an envelope. It read personal identification notification. What's this? I opened it, and my face turned pale. A marriage application. I immediately called the attorney, explaining the situation. It means someone submitted a marriage application without your consent. Typically, both parties go to the county clerk order's office to submit a marriage application. But one person can submit it too. In that case, the local authority notifies the absent party. That's the personal identification notification. This is to ensure that the marriage application isn't submitted without the other's knowledge. There's only one person who'd do this. It has to be Bob. Infuriated, I reported the matter to the police through my attorney and sought advice. If you file for a marriage annulment mediation, it seems like a hassle, but it's the only way. I had the lawyer start on it immediately. At the same time, I reached out to my mother-in-law, thinking it'd be pointless to contact Bob. Well, the thing is, I explained everything to her, and as expected, she was livid. Bob, get over here. I could hear her yelling at him over the phone, followed by Bob's crying. It wasn't what you think. I did it for Catherine. What are you on about? What you did is a crime. You realize that? But He began to wail pathetically. It was unbearable to hear, so I hung up. The next day, led by his mother, Bob showed up at the attorney's office. As soon as he entered the office, he immediately apologized. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. Excuse me? There's no way I'm forgiving this. But I did it for Catherine. He started with the same excuse. So I told him, submitting a fake marriage registration can be considered forging an official document, you know. Of course, that's just a possibility. It's uncertain if he'd actually be charged with a crime. But as a threat, it worked wonders. Bob apologized again. I'm sorry. Please. I don't want to go to jail. Too bad. Reflect on what you did. With that, Bob broke down in tears. Later on, in court, Bob confessed to forging the marriage certificate. I assume he testified that way, hoping to get leniency. However, life isn't that easy. Although he wasn't prosecuted, it didn't change the fact that he committed a crime. In the end, Bob lost his job and became an outcast in the community. Whenever people saw him in public, they whispered behind his back. Unable to take the ostracism, he moved to a small town. Now, he's scraping by, working part-time in a warehouse. While I'm not ready to think about remarrying, I do want a fulfilling personal life. Things with Paul are looking pretty good, to be honest. If and when I feel ready to move on from the divorce, I'll think positively about it. Are you kidding me? Faking sickness? Do you have any idea what I went through? It wasn't a fake. I really had a heat stroke. The reason my mother-in-law was so angry was that I couldn't attend my father-in-law's funeral. It's not like I didn't want to attend the funeral. That day, I felt ill from the morning. I had symptoms of heat stroke and couldn't even stand up. I deeply regretted not being able to attend. But my mother-in-law didn't care about that. She yelled at me. Heat stroke? You could have come if you really pushed yourself. I was so weak I couldn't even stand. I thought I'd be more of a bother if I went. Stop messing around. I don't want to hear your excuses. After our argument, my mother-in-law pushed me hard. Oh no. The place where we had our argument was right at the top of the stairs. Losing my balance after she shoved me, I tumbled down the stairs. Suddenly, my mother-in-law shouted, "Watch out!" It took me a second to understand, but I saw her beloved dog at the bottom of the stairs. Even if she told me to avoid it, I had no choice but to collide with the dog. My name is Amy. I'm turning 26 this year. I've been married for 2 years to my husband, Kevin, who is 4 years older than me. We don't have kids yet, but we live happily together. Did you go to my mom's again today? Yeah. Sorry you have to do that every day. Ever since we got married, I started a part-time job at a local supermarket. But every day after work, there's a place I must visit, my in-laws. My mother-in-law is a stay-at-home mom, but she never does any housework herself. You gonna keep working after marrying Kevin? I plan to. Why not switch to part-time? Then come to our house every day and help with the chores. Your domestic skills will improve, right? If you don't like it, then you shouldn't marry Kevin. I see. During our first visit to my in-laws' house for introductions, I had a moment alone with my mother-in-law. That's when she set this absurd condition for our marriage. So, what's it gonna be? You gonna do it? I understand. I'll do it. Honestly, I wanted to refuse such a ridiculous condition. But I wanted to marry Kevin, so I reluctantly agreed. I've been going to my in-laws' house every weekday to do chores since then. I'm told not to come on weekends because my father-in-law is home. She probably doesn't want him to find out. I have to do everything: laundry, cleaning, preparing dinner, and shopping. On Fridays, I also have to prepare meals for the weekend. It must be tough for you every day. You can take a break once in a while, you know? Yeah, but I'm okay. My husband, seeing how exhausted I look every day, tries to comfort me with kind words. If I didn't have to go, I wouldn't. Not only do I have to do chores at my in-laws' place, but I also have to handle our own home. I once pleaded with my mother-in-law to let me have a day off. But she coldly suggested, "Oh, really? Then we don't need you in this family anymore. Why don't you divorce Kevin and live a carefree life on your own?" I don't want to divorce. My parents were so thrilled about our marriage. So, it's been hard for me to tell Kevin that it's too much for me. How much longer will this continue? Physically and emotionally, I felt I was reaching my breaking point and had dark thoughts every day. But I never imagined things would escalate so much with my mother-in-law. One day, after finishing my part-time job, I went to my in-laws' house as usual. My mother-in-law had a grave expression on her face. "What's wrong?" "Oh, Amy. It's nothing." Despite saying it's nothing, her face was somber and her voice was low. She was clearly not her usual self. I should have let it be, but for some reason, I was concerned and asked her again about it. "You clearly look upset. What happened?" "Well, my husband has been diagnosed with colon cancer. They've given him only a short time to live. He's been urgently hospitalized, and he might not come back home." "What?" I hadn't seen my father-in-law recently, so I had no idea he was suffering from such a severe illness. Being told about the limited time he had left, I didn't know how to comfort my mother-in-law, and I fell silent. "You don't have to be down too. Just go home for today. Do you not want me to do the chores?" "I just want to be alone today. So, no need for chores." As my mother-in-law said, I left their home that day. But thinking about it, it's quite heartbreaking. If my husband, Kevin, had such an illness, it wouldn't be someone else's business. My mother-in-law must have been devastated. I decided to give her some space, and I didn't go to their house the next day. However, the day after that, she called. "Hello. How are you? Why didn't you come yesterday?" "I thought, since you were feeling down." "That's no excuse. Come over now." She didn't have to get so angry. After she hung up abruptly, I headed to their house immediately. "You worthless daughter-in-law! The laundry's piled up, and I couldn't even eat dinner yesterday. Get to work! And while you're at it, take care of the dog." Entering their living room, I was met with a chaotic scene of clothes strewn everywhere. How could they make such a mess in just a day? In a way, that's quite a talent. I'll get right on it. I started by picking up the clothes scattered on the floor and began doing the laundry. And there was such a pile. While I was operating the washing machine, my mother-in-law called from the living room. "Why are you just standing there? Hurry up and clean." I know. I held back from retorting. If I talked back, she might threaten divorce again. She instructed me to clean the room where her beloved dog stayed. Ugh. What's that awful smell? That room didn't have air conditioning. The poor dog living in such conditions was pitiable. Moreover, its waste was left untouched, creating a terrible stench.
You should take better care of the dog.
I know. This is to get back at you. If you care about the dog, then why? While listening to my mother-in-law, I was thinking that internally. After that day, my mother-in-law's mistreatment escalated. Taking advantage of my father-in-law's absence, she started summoning me not just on weekdays but on weekends too, burdening me with all sorts of chores. Ultimately, I even ended up having to walk her dog. Living this way, I lost a significant amount of weight. I was sleep-deprived, waking up early, and looking after my own home became quite a challenge. Then, 6 months after my father-in-law's hospitalization, he passed away after his long battle.
David!
My mother-in-law cried out in the hospital room. I also shed tears, watching that scene. Though I hadn't seen him much recently, he always cared for me when we did meet. It was heartbreaking that he was gone. I wanted to pay my respects and gratitude at the funeral. But the next day, I woke up feeling extremely ill. I wanted to bid him farewell with all my gratitude. However, the next morning when I woke up, I felt terribly ill. It was hard even to stand up. I had been making various preparations for my father-in-law's funeral, but symptoms similar to heatstroke began to manifest. Gradually, my hands and feet started cramping.
Hey, are you okay?
You look pale. Kevin voiced his concern around noon. Apparently, my complexion was very off.
Yeah. I feel awful. My hands and feet are cramping. Might be heat stroke.
Don't overdo it, okay?
Yeah. I think I'll be okay if I just rest a bit.
I reassured Kevin and decided to rest in a cooler room. However, even when it was time to head to the funeral, my condition didn't improve.
I'm sorry. I'm not feeling well. If I go like this, I might just be a bother.
It's all right. Amy, why don't you rest at home? I'll explain everything to everyone.
I'm so sorry. I couldn't be there for your dad's last moments.
Don't apologize. It's only natural to prioritize your own health. Make sure you get some good sleep, okay? Reassured by my husband's kind words, I saw him off as he left for the funeral and, feeling relieved, I soon fell asleep. When I woke up and checked the clock, it was just past 5 a.m. the next morning. What? I slept that long? I was surprised at how long I'd been out. But thanks to that, I felt completely refreshed. As I went about my usual routine, making breakfast and cleaning up, my husband woke up.
Good morning. Did you sleep well?
Good morning. Thanks to you, I'm feeling great now.
About yesterday. I explained everything to Mom, but she's really upset you didn't attend the funeral.
Figures. Guess I have to go and apologize. I wasn't really looking forward to it, but I decided to head to my in-laws' house and apologized to my mother-in-law in person. Hello. What are you doing here?
I'm sorry about yesterday.
Just come in for now. Upon arriving at my in-laws, I apologized and was allowed inside. She's quite mad. She glared at me with cold eyes. However, she didn't say or do anything further and quickly retreated to her room upstairs. I need to apologize properly. I followed her upstairs and tried to talk to her.
I'm really sorry about yesterday.
What are you sorry for?
For not being able to attend the funeral.
The moment I said that, my mother-in-law screamed at me, her face red with anger. Are you kidding me? Faking sickness? Do you have any idea what I went through?
I wasn't faking it. I really had heat stroke.
I truly didn't want to skip the funeral. I wanted to be there for my father-in-law's last moments. But of course, she didn't know how I felt. And continued to yell at me. Heat stroke? You could have come if you really tried.
It was so bad I couldn't even stand, and I thought I'd just be in the way.
Stop it with the excuses. I don't want to hear it. After arguing with my mother-in-law, she pushed me hard. Oh no. The argument took place right at the top of the stairs. Losing my balance, I tumbled down the stairs. Suddenly, she shouted, "Watch out!" In a split second, I realized her beloved dog was at the bottom of the stairs. Even if she told me to watch out, there was nothing I could do. I ended up colliding with the dog. "What have you done?" Frantically, she rushed down the stairs. Ignoring me, she was only concerned about her dog. So, in her eyes, I'm less important than the dog. As I faded into unconsciousness, that thought lingered in my mind. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. Huh? The hospital? Why? I was disoriented, looking around in confusion. "Amy! You're awake! Thank God!" My husband was beside the bed, relief evident on his face. "Why do you look so upset?" "I fell from the stairs." "Oh, I remember now." I recalled being pushed down the stairs by my mother-in-law. "She told me you slipped and fell. I was so worried." "Slipped? Did she tell you that?" "Yes, why?" "She pushed me, and now she's lying about it." My mother-in-law seemed to have given false information to my husband. "No, it wasn't like that. Your mother actually pushed me." "What? You're kidding, right?" "I'm not kidding. When I apologized for not attending your dad's funeral, she got heated and pushed me. I remember colliding with her dog after that, but..." Hearing the truth from me, Kevin buried his face in his hands. Well, it's no wonder. His own mother did something almost murderous. "Mom did that. I'm so sorry, Amy," Kevin said, and then staggered out of my hospital room. Luckily, I only suffered bruises and was discharged the next day. There's still a bit of pain, but it shouldn't interfere with daily life. I'm home. As I entered the house, I could hear Kevin arguing with his mother from the living room. "What have you done?" "I've told you, I didn't do anything." "What's all the fuss about?" I opened the door to the living room where they were arguing. "What's going on here?" "I got home and was confronting Mom about what you told me yesterday, but she insists it didn't happen." "I didn't do anything, right?" The nerve of her to play innocent in front of me. I can't believe her. "More importantly, because of you falling down the stairs, my dear dog got hurt. Aren't you going to apologize for that?" "Ah, that dog. Glad it was only injured." "But is she serious?" "She's the one who should be apologizing." My anger towards her started to bubble up. "If you don't say anything, how will we know? Can't you apologize? If you can't, maybe you shouldn't be with Kevin. Should I help you guys divorce?" "That's enough. I've had it." Having reached my limit, I decided to vent all the frustration I've been holding back on her. "If you want a divorce, go right ahead. But aren't you the one who needs to apologize?" "Sure, I'm sorry for injuring your dog. But this was all because of you. If you hadn't pushed me, none of this would have happened." "What? Do you have any proof that I pushed you?" "If that's how you want to play it, that's fine. Maybe I should have the police investigate this as assault?" If she thinks I'm just going to let this slide, she's mistaken. But the moment I mentioned the police, her face turned pale. "The police? You're exaggerating." "Exaggerating? I lost consciousness because of what you did. It was fortunate that I only got bruises, but what if it had been worse? What if I had died? You'd be arrested for murder, wouldn't you?" "That's..." "So, what will you do? Apologize?" She looked like she was about to cry. She must really not want to get involved with the police. But instead of apologizing, she just stood there silently. Losing his patience, Kevin started yelling at her. "What's it gonna be, huh? Say something. Weren't you the one who said silence won't solve anything?" I'm sorry. I promise I won't do anything like this ever again. Please forgive me." It took her son yelling at her to apologize? She clearly doesn't take me seriously. Even though she apologized, deep down, I felt resentment. "Well, all right. I'll let it slide just this once." "Really?" She looked relieved, probably thinking I had forgiven everything. But she's mistaken. I was only forgiving the incident with the stairs. She thought I'd forgive everything she's done? Boy, was she wrong. I confronted my mother-in-law and said, "As for this incident, sure, but I'm not gonna let go of everything else. Every single day, you took advantage of me. Cleaning, laundry, cooking, shopping. You dumped everything on me. Every time I tried to refuse, you'd threaten me with divorce. I'm fed up. I never want to see your face again. Just get out of here. Ah. I'm so sorry." In sheer fear, my mother-in-law's voice wavered, and she slumped to the ground. It seemed her knees had given out, unable to get up. Looking down at her, I pressed on. "Don't you dare dump your chores on me again. And if you try anything like this, I won't hesitate to call the police. Got it? Now, get out of this house." "Yes. I'm sorry." The tables had turned. Completely terrified of me, my mother-in-law crawled out of the living room and left my house. Phew, that felt good. "Amy, when you get mad, you're kinda scary." Well, maybe if you take me lightly, you'll end up like your mother. I'd never underestimate you. I'll take it to heart. After my mother-in-law left, Kevin and I had that conversation. In the past, I was constantly threatened with divorce by her, never really able to speak my mind. This incident allowed me to finally give her a piece of it, a silver lining in an unfortunate situation. Thinking about it, no one can force someone to divorce. Back then, I felt cornered, unable to think clearly. At least now, I don't have to visit and take care of her anymore. She's gonna have to step up and do her chores. A week later, I was back to my peaceful routine. The bruises from the fall had healed, and I felt no pain. What made me happiest was not having to go to that stressful house every day. After finishing my part-time job, I returned home to relax and do housework. The simple joys in life felt so rewarding. I'm home. Kevin returned from work, though he was later than usual. "Welcome back. You're late today. Did you have overtime?" "No. I went to check on my mother." Right, I might have cut ties with her, but she's still Kevin's only remaining family. "Oh, I see. How's she doing? Is she okay?" But as I asked, Kevin's face darkened. I thought, could she be sick? If so, I'd genuinely feel sorry for Kevin. Losing both parents to severe illness one after the other. Such thoughts crossed my mind, but it turned out I was mistaken. She's not doing any housework. The house is filled with trash, clothes scattered everywhere, and she hasn't been taking care of the dog either. It stank so bad." Really? She probably forgot how to do housework since she always relied on me. But, when I yelled at her, saying if she can't clean, I'll put her in a care facility, she quickly started cleaning. It's just unbelievable. After being disappointed by her son and abandoned by her daughter-in-law, she's reaping what she sowed. 6 months later, Kevin occasionally visits her, but she's still as lazy as ever. But I've got my own life now. I've decided to live happily with Kevin and our unborn child, without any interference. "You can't even cook a meal, you trash. Go freeze in the backyard." With that, James shut the window and locked it. I immediately ran to the window. "Please! Open it!" I begged as I pounded on the window, but James just grinned and drew the curtains. I began to shiver from the cold. I could feel my body, which had been warmed by the heater until just a moment ago, rapidly losing its warmth. What am I gonna do? If it continues this way, even my baby inside me. Just as I was on the verge of passing out from the intense cold and shock, a savior extended a hand to me and was like, "Are you okay?" The next day, I returned home with him. In the yard, James was freezing, naked. When I was staring in shock at the sight, Liam stepped forward. "That was what you said, wasn't it? If you can't even cook properly, then freeze outside." Liam spoke to James with a cold gaze and tone. James, shivering in the yard, couldn't even reply properly. "I'll call an ambulance out of the goodness of my heart. Emily, you want to say anything to him before it arrives?" Nodding in response to his words, I took a step closer to James. My name is Emily Smith. I'm a 28-year-old homemaker. My mother passed away due to an illness shortly after I started working. My father, following her, suddenly died of a heart attack. Being an only child, I was left completely alone. The loneliness was unbearable, but I distracted myself by immersing myself in work.
Emily, are you okay? You seem to be pushing yourself.
The one who reached out to me during that time was my husband, James. He had a way of comforting my grieving heart, always there to support me when I was crying alone. Then, once I had somewhat recovered, he pursued a relationship. And after dating for a few years, we got married.
Wow, we're so pleased to have such a lovely young woman join our family.
Yes, for James, he's brought home quite a nice young lady. After our wedding, I started living with James' family. We got along very well.
Emily, I saw on TV the other day that there's a new cafe near the train station. Let's go together sometime.
Yes, I'd love to. I particularly hit it off with my mother-in-law, and we go out for a meal together once a week. I also get along well with my father-in-law, who loves to cook, and we've cooked together in the kitchen several times.
I'm glad you're getting along with my family.
But isn't my younger brother a bit of a handful?
Oh, not at all.
It's true that I don't talk much with Liam, my brother-in-law. Since he works from home, he often stays in his room. But I was interested in his work, and when I asked about it, he explained it to me in detail. So I've been getting along well with James' family. A few years after we got married, I became pregnant with James' child. Given the severity of my morning sickness, I decided to quit my job.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, don't push yourself. This wasn't just my decision. I discussed it thoroughly with James' family. In fact, the earnings of both James and Liam are enough for us to live on, and I also have savings. Besides, my father-in-law works, and my mother-in-law has a part-time job, so there's no problem with me quitting.
Man, pregnant women have it good. They don't have to work and no one complains.
Lately, though, James has been complaining about this. James was also present during our discussions, and at the time he was the first to suggest I should quit.
Just a freeloader without a job. Acting all high and mighty.
Who's acting high and mighty? When did I ever order you around? I'm the one cleaning up the clothes you leave around, you know? That being said, I've always been a competitive person, and I would always prove James wrong. You should have spoken up during our discussions if you had complaints. Exactly. It was you who brought it up, James.
Right. Instead of complaining, take care of your own responsibilities.
Because my parents-in-law agree with me and side with me, James feels isolated. Liam and James don't get along very well, so Liam never takes James' side.
James looks down on me because I work from home. He doesn't listen to me and doesn't consider me a help at all.
That's what Liam murmured. That's why Liam doesn't even join such conversations. James doesn't like this situation, and when we're alone, he complains even more.
Just because my family likes you doesn't mean you should get too cocky.
I'm not getting cocky. Everyone is just being reasonable. Even if it were just the two of us, I never lost to James. But once the morning sickness kicked in, I lost the energy to even argue.
Pregnancy isn't an illness. If you're not working, you're no different from a bomb.
I agree it's not a disease. But Emily is risking her life to nurture another. That's work in itself. Then, Liam stepped in to help. Whenever James complained to me, Liam would immediately come to my aid and report to his parents. While James was being scolded by his parents, Liam took care of me.
At this rate, it's hard to tell who the real father is.
I muttered, rubbing my belly. Well, with my in-laws keeping an eye on things, I hoped James would change eventually. Until that time, I trusted James. Oh, James hasn't returned yet?
Seems like it.
Then, all of a sudden, James started coming home late. He said it was due to overtime, but I wasn't sure if that was true. Even on his days off, he was like,
"Got called into work. I'm busy, so I'm gonna stay at the office."
Sometimes he didn't return home at all. Honestly, I started to suspect James was cheating. So did his parents. We tried to gather evidence together, but it was hard to catch him in the act. He only seemed to be at the office, and there was no sign of any particular woman.
Well, we can't really know what's going on inside the company.
I asked one of the junior employees, but she said there's nothing unusual.
Oh. Hey, Emily, don't push yourself.
Around that time, my morning sickness got so severe that I couldn't do any household chores. But my father-in-law took care of the cooking, and my mother-in-law handled the other chores. Liam also pitched in, so everything was fine.
Aren't you ashamed?
Huh? Lying around all day, not doing any housework, even though you're a homemaker. What's the point of you even being here? James, having seen his parents doing the housework, woke me up in the middle of the night just to say that. When I was frowning, Liam retorted like,
"That's not something someone who's not doing his part as a husband should be saying. Every single time, you defy me, even though I'm the eldest."
Well, you're not exactly the kind of brother I can look up to.
You've always been such a smartass.
The argument between the brothers escalated, and just before it turned into a physical fight, the commotion was heard by their parents who intervened to stop them. After hearing the situation, they scolded James.
"That's enough. Do whatever you want." "Wait, James. Where are you going?"
Without answering me, James left. "I'm really sorry about that fool. We truly apologize." In place of James, they apologized to me, and the matter was settled there. However, James's attitude has been getting worse. Something needs to be done soon. I was at a loss for what to do. What should I do?
Is everything all right?
One Saturday, my mother-in-law and father-in-law had plans to travel for a local event. They had arranged this trip in advance, but they seemed concerned about James's recent behavior.
"I'm worried about leaving you behind." "I'm fine. My morning sickness has settled down quite a bit."
Even they were quite concerned. I saw them off with a smile and they headed off on a 3-day trip. Around the same time, Liam had some overnight commitments.
"I'm sorry for leaving during such a time."
"Don't worry about it. Take care and be safe." Not long after my mother-in-law and father-in-law left, Liam departed as well. That day, unusually, James was home, though he was still asleep. I was like,
"Well, I've got things to do,"
and got up. Honestly, I was not feeling my best. But if I just lay around doing nothing, I didn't know what James might say. Thankfully, there were plenty of dishes that my father-in-law had prepped and stored in the fridge. I began cleaning and doing laundry, taking it slow and easy on myself. "Hey, breakfast." "Oh, just woke up?" James finally got up close to noon. With his hair still tousled and a grumpy look on his face, he demanded breakfast. I rolled my eyes and pulled some leftovers from the fridge.
"What's that?"
"Huh?
You mean the leftovers your father made?"
You, being a homemaker, can't even cook?" That remark irked me. Why do I have to hear this? Does he not realize I'm carrying his child? There's no justification for such a comment. "Sorry, right now my job is to take care of my baby in my belly. Adult care has been on the back burner."
"How dare you talk like that to your husband?"
Just as James shouted at me, the door was flung open with a bang. Standing there was Liam. I could hear shouting all the way outside.
"You, shut in."
James shot Liam a dirty look and headed back into his room, murmuring some curse words under his breath. Just as I thought James made a noise, he seemed to leave the house. Liam sighed heavily.
"You okay?"
"Yeah. What brought you here?" "I came to pick up something I forgot." Saying that, Liam looked at me with a worried expression. I chuckled, thinking how much he resembled his mother. "It's okay, you know. Go on, be on your way."
"I'll be going then."
Liam looked back at me hesitantly before finally leaving. I wondered, where did the James the first met back then go? At this rate, a divorce, but I still want to be family with my in-laws. Feeling suddenly exhausted, I decided to lie down. and as I closed my eyes, I drifted into a deep sleep. Emily, time to wake up. Oh. As I hurriedly sat up, I met James's eyes, who was giving me a wry smile. I must have dozed off completely. I'm gonna get an earful from James again. I'd let you sleep, but it's already evening, he said, surprising me with his gentle tone. My eyes widened in shock. James was like, I've prepared dinner, so when you're up, come join me. With that, he left the room. There was a blanket over me, and I couldn't help but wonder if James had covered me. I headed to the kitchen. I found my father-in-law's dishes already warmed up, ready to eat. I'm sorry, Emily. James was like, when I heard we were having a child, I was ecstatic. But then, I felt so overwhelmed, and I took it out on you. This is my way of saying sorry. James presented a cake. Honestly, this gesture wouldn't erase all of James's past behaviors. But him apologizing genuinely warmed my heart. For now, I decided to let it go and enjoy our meal together.
Hey, look! It's starting to snow.
Oh, you're right.
Let's go take a closer look.
Saying that, James headed towards the porch. Watching his childlike excitement, I chuckled and followed him. The sight of the white snow falling against the backdrop of the night was indeed beautiful. As I came from an area where it rarely snowed, this scene felt fresh to me. Without thinking, I moved closer to the window.
Let's open the window.
No, it's gonna be cold.
Just put on a jacket and you'll be fine.
As he draped a jacket over me and opened the window, the chilly wind rushed in. Just as I was bracing myself against the cold, James tugged at my arm. Huh? Before I knew it, I was outside. Turning around, there was James, grinning mischievously. You're a homemaker, and yet you don't do the housework? That makes you a failure as a wife. Reflect on that tonight. Excuse me? What are you talking about? You can't even cook a meal, you trash. Go freeze in the backyard. With that, James shut the window and locked it. I immediately ran to the window.
Please! Open it!
I begged as I pounded on the window, but James just grinned and drew the curtains. I began to shiver from the cold. I could feel my body, which had been warmed by the heater until just a moment ago, rapidly losing its warmth. What am I gonna do if it continues this way, even my baby inside me? Just as I was on the verge of passing out from the intense cold and shock, a savior extended a hand to me and was like,
Are you okay?
He immediately put me in the car.
Why are you out here at this time of night?
The one who helped me was Liam. Liam had been worried about James, so he came home earlier than planned. The car's heater warmed me up, and I sighed in relief. Liam was like, We should go to the hospital, just in case. He drove me to the hospital. Thanks to Liam's quick response, fortunately, both my baby and I were fine. And while I was being examined, Liam had apparently arranged for a hotel. We were able to stay at the hotel, but Liam left and went somewhere else. I'm so relieved. You're gonna be a strong baby, aren't you? Feeling reassured that I've arrived at the hotel, I rubbed my belly. I was so glad nothing happened. I was exhausted, so as soon as I lay down on the bed, I fell asleep. Oh, Emily. Are you okay now? Yes, completely. Thank you so much. No worries. Shall we go? The next day, I returned home with him. In the yard, James was freezing, naked. When I was staring in shock at the sight, Liam stepped forward. That was what you said, wasn't it? If you can't even cook properly, then freeze outside. Liam spoke to James with a cold gaze and tone. James, shivering in the yard, couldn't even reply properly. I'll call an ambulance out of the goodness of my heart. Emily, you want to say anything to him before it arrives? Nodding in response to his words, I took a step closer to James.
It's because of you that our baby was almost in grave danger. I will never forgive you. Just you wait.
Then James was taken to the hospital, and I asked Liam what had happened last night. After dropping me off at the hotel, Liam sneaked back home alone. At home, he found James sleeping in the living room stripped down, and a woman who appeared to be his mistress was there as well. He brought his mistress home thinking we wouldn't be around. And with you locked out, he seemed pretty confident. Liam, burning with rage, apparently threw James out of the house in his birthday suit. Liam was like, "Now see who's the real trash. Think about it all night." He then grilled the shocked mistress for information, got evidence, and forcibly sent her back to her place. It turns out she also had a family, and by the time he informed them of everything, dawn was approaching. He took a short nap in the car and then came to pick me up. That's how it all went down. I've spoken to my parents. They said they're gonna come home today. He told me with a gentle smile and stayed by my side until they returned. It's gonna be okay now. Liam, thank you so much. Nah, I just did what had to be done. Thanks to him, I could feel safe at home.
Emily, I'm so sorry. That idiot, I can't apologize enough.
They apologized immediately upon their return and went straight to giving James a piece of their mind. James was forced to pay child support and was then decided to be kicked out.
I'm so sorry. It was just a lapse in judgment. Emily, I truly love only you.
But as James clung to me, I ignored him. As if it's just me. I wish he'd stop taking me for a fool.
Don't look at me like that.
Suddenly, James flared up, raising his hand at me.
Enough is enough. My damn son!
Liam grabbed and twisted James's arm. With the intervention of my father-in-law, James was easily overpowered.
Emily! I really just lost my mind for a moment. Emily!
I watched him being thrown out by the two men, all the while being held by my mother-in-law. He was pathetic until the very end. As for James, that's all I ever thought. By the way, Liam's pretty strong, isn't he? Considering what just happened, and the way he tossed a full-grown man outside. I was genuinely surprised by Liam's strength. Oh, yeah? He used to do combat sport back in the day.
I definitely wouldn't use a move on an amateur, though.
Liam, who had returned, said this with a refreshing smile. I couldn't help but feel a flutter in my heart at his smile, and my mother-in-law laughed upon noticing.
With such good looks and strength, it's almost surprising he doesn't have a girlfriend.
Oh, hush. Seeing him look away bashfully after my mother-in-law's remark, I couldn't help but find it endearing. From then on, I decided to stay and be cared for in my in-laws' home since I had no family or reliable person to turn to. If you'd allow, I'd love to hold your baby. Of course, anytime. Right now, the four of us are eagerly awaiting the birth of my precious baby. Upon talking to Liam, it turns out that James' affair was with a junior from his office. No wonder she wouldn't spill the beans when asked. The two of them were sneaking around and getting cozy at various spots. Once I reported it to the junior's husband, he did a thorough investigation. With that evidence, my divorce process went smoothly. Both of them got fired for fooling around during work hours and for claiming their dates as business expenses. The reason I know this is, James came back to his family's home begging like,
"Please! Forgive me!"
While shouting these words, he came seeking my help, but his family was like,
"How dare you showing up? Don't you dare burden Emily anymore! Never show your face here again!"
And with that, my entire in-laws family chased him off. Amidst all this, I found myself drawn to Liam, who was more reliable than anyone. Thank you for all the help. Well, it's only natural to want to help someone you love, right?
Wait, what?
Oops. Liam's face turned beet red, and seeing him like that made me blush too. Then I found out that Liam had had feelings for me for quite some time. Liam was like, "Everyone seems to dislike it when I talk about my job, but only Emily really listened to me. Seeing you appreciate my words. But, you were my brother's wife, so I always thought I should keep these feelings hidden." With that, he looked down, and I found myself doing the same. Who would have thought he felt that way about me? To be honest, I'm not looking to be with someone like that right now. I figured. But, if you can wait a little. I want to respond to those feelings. He suddenly looked up at my words. And he beamed a radiant smile at me.
All right. I'm gonna give it my all to win you over.
Oh. I'll brace myself then. By the way, our conversation was fully witnessed by his parents, and dinner was quite a feast.
Finally, Liam has a girlfriend.
Knock it off. Seeing his overjoyed mother, Liam blushed deeply and retorted. Both his father and I exchanged glances and laughed. Afterwards, I gave birth to a beautiful daughter, right on schedule.
She's so adorable. Congratulations. She really looks like Emily, so cute. She's gonna be a heartbreaker. No man's gonna be able to resist.
I wouldn't want to let her go. Liam said, and both his parents chided like.
You're getting ahead of yourself.
I couldn't help but smile at Liam, who was fully in dad mode. Liam continued to be very supportive of me and was actively involved in child rearing. His parents were the same. Whenever I turned around, someone was always there looking out for my daughter, allowing me to raise her with peace of mind. And 100 days after finalized my divorce with James. I want to be her father. Please, marry me.
Like your parents said, you're getting ahead of yourself.
Oh, so dating first, right?
Either way is fine with me.
Liam's face lit up at my words. However, this was repeatedly followed by some good-natured teasing from my mother-in-law, who had seen everything. Meanwhile, James, after being fired, paid back the money he embezzled in one lump sum. Word is, he borrowed from some shady folks. And now he's gone missing, taken away by some menacing-looking men. Well, wherever he is, whatever he's up to, I just wish him the best. My in-laws are over the moon with their granddaughter, showing no concern about James. Liam probably doesn't even remember James existed. Years later, I happily remarried Liam. Our daughter calls him daddy, and Liam is absolutely smitten with her. The second one's gonna be a boy.
Yeah? I mean, if he takes after me, that's cool, but a boy who looks like Emily would be awesome too.
In my belly, I'm carrying our second child. Our daughter is super excited about becoming a big sister. Now, the entire family is brainstorming names. Looks like our daughter's suggestion might win though.
I'm gonna make Emily, our daughter, and the new baby happy.
You better include yourself in that too, you know? We plan to live happily ever after. All 6 of us, living in harmony and having fun. That's the promise Liam and I have made. We're looking forward to going out as a family once this baby is born.